I'm a guy that's 25. Lego Star Wars is my life. I like Ryan Johnson. I'm Rich Boy J. Hey guys, Rich Boy J here, back with another video, and this is going to be another episode of the Lego Star Wars MOC Showcase. This is a collection of some of the coolest Lego Star Wars MOCs that I found on the internet recently, so if you guys find any of them interesting, please go support the builders by using the links I've included in the description. These guys deserve all the credit. The first MOC we'll be looking at today is titled Repurposed N1 Naboo Starfighter by hypolite bricks. The gist of this build is basically the rebels have taken a Naboo starfighter and they are repurposing it to fit their needs for the rebellion, which I think is just a really cool concept of a MOC. Like, I've actually never seen something like this where someone's just taken, you know, some random Republic era ship and then thrown it in like a Yavin or a Rebel hangar and basically shown what it would be like when they were, you know, trying to repurpose it, take it apart, add things to it to better suit their needs. So just as a concept, I really love this MOC, but there are also so many technical things in this build that you have to appreciate. I'm going to start with the bottom left corner because this is something that really stuck out to me upon my first glance of the build. I love the detail he included in the floor of this MOC. It's snot, which is really cool, but there's a really cool crack detail. There's actually a few crack details he's included in the floor of here, which I think just screams Yavin, right? You think of Yavin, you think of, you know, what the floor might look like. It's obviously a very like classic and old temple being used as a rebel base, so you'd imagine, you know, a lot of the things in it wouldn't be in great condition, and I love how the builder has had that reflected in the ground here. You can see there's a crack in the ground and there's even a little pipe exposed, which is really just the kicker here. That is just so awesome in my opinion. We also have just tons of rebels around, and the minifig selection for this MOC I'd say is top notch. Like, there's such a nice diverse array of minifigs, torsos, different combinations of like torsos and leg pieces to just give this a really nice rebel aesthetic. I love what he did with the build in that regard. I also have to talk about a lot of the greebly and cargo and just machinery bits that are hanging out all around this build. I always love to look at builders designs for cargo crates because we see so many cargo crates in Star Wars, and when you sit down and you start building a MOC, it might not be the most obvious thing to design. Like, you want to make something that looks cool, but you also want it to be unique. So I always try to pay close attention to see how people construct various cargo crates. One of that I love in this build is over to the left side, right next to the ladder. These four little canisters just look really nice. I like that design. I also love the little makeshift table he's concocted with the two grill pieces, or actually those are ladder pieces, and I think there's like some battle droid arms connecting them together. That's just a really nice looking table. There's tons of tools and such laying around the MOC, which is awesome. And then towards the bottom right side of the MOC, we have even more like engine pieces and cargo crates and just various things that you would expect to be thrown about a rebel base like this, rebel hangar specifically. And I just think that's freaking awesome. Another thing that I noticed is the usage of just like these barricade pieces kind of around the build. And once again, they look makeshift. You know, it's not super uniform. That's not what you would expect from the rebels, but it's like two very different barricades that they might just have laying around to tell people, look, like, stay away from this ship while we're working on it so you don't get hurt. And that's just so cool to me. It adds a lot of character and life to a build where you can see things that maybe aren't necessarily like, you know, consistent with each other and think, I guess in your head, kind of fill in the blanks as to how these things might have gotten there. Over to the top right side of the build, I love this little mini command center he's got set up here using these 3x3 trans blue dishes to basically make a planet. Like, that is freaking awesome. That looks so cool. And it looks like he even has Mon Mothma, General Kraken, and C-3PO kind of hanging around the table. Over to the right side, we have one of those Rebel utility carts making its way into the build, which is nice. I think that the fact that this MOC is kind of bordered on the right side with some pretty familiar like Yavin architecture just by way of the dark tan bricks and slopes that make up the walls, as well as the arches and even those olive green leaf pieces that make up the foliage that just, you know, sticks to the sides of the Yavin walls. That's just a really nice touch to this build. Like, this build would be cool on its own if that wall weren't there, if it were just the floor, but I like that. It's a nice splash of color in this MOC, I guess outside of the Naboo starfighter, and it really does help just really give you the feeling of being on Yavin. The last thing I have to mention on this MOC is, of course, this Naboo starfighter, which looks pretty cool. I love that. It looks mostly uniform aside from a few things, like the engines are obviously a bit different. It looks like they've probably taken off the shell of a lot of this thing and there's just some exposed components to it. I love what he's done with this main side panel, like how it looks like they just ripped off all of like the yellow shell to it and it's exposing all the innards of the ship. I think that's just so awesome in my opinion. And I also think it's a pretty fun touch that he added like a Rebel, I guess, graphic designer, putting the Rebel logo on the front of the Naboo starfighter. And finally, the crane is also a pretty nice touch. So overall, this is a MOC I would just say has a lot of character. You can see that there are so many just details and it looks like a lot of thought was put into every individual element of this build. And I love builds like this. Like, it's not a huge build, it's not, you know, a grand build, but this is one of those builds that you could literally look at for an hour, noticing new things and appreciating all the small details that the builder has incorporated. So wonderful job, man. The next MOC we're going to look at is by JS Ninja Nerd. It's called The Last Stand, and I think it's supposed to be depicting events from the Battle of Jakku, and there's a lot to love here. The first thing that stuck out to me are these big rock formations towards the back of the build. I love how he's basically used a layering technique using a bunch of like snot layers of a combination of slopes and plates and bricks, of course, to create these nice like looking rocks. I honestly can't explain it much better than that, but I think the rocks especially work here because typically these rock formations are the result of just many years of the ground gaining many layers, like centuries of layering that's happening to create these rocks. So the fact that he's built this in a way that I think kind of mimics that works really well. Like, these look exactly the way they should, and if I was building rock formations, I would definitely take many hints from this because I think this works out pretty perfectly. I have to talk about the minifigure placement here. I love that you have kind of the rebels sneaking around the rocks. There's the one over to the left side, and then of course the three coming down the middle between the rocks, and the minifigs, specifically the rebels, just look really nice. I'm honestly a big fan of that hat and the smaller goggle combination. Usually Lego, for whatever reason, would give these rebels from like the Rebel Battle Pack the big white Hoth goggles, and I just feel like these smaller ones work so much better on that hat. It's a small thing, but I know when I was, for instance, working on Crate, that was a modification I made to those hats to basically make more accurate and just good looking Rebel figures. So I appreciate that. I love that this one Stormtrooper up front is getting blasted, and he has the red gem piece on his chest connected using one of those neck bracket pieces flipped around, which is kind of cool. Like, that's creative. I never would have thought of doing that, but I love seeing people come up with creative ways to show stormtroopers getting wiped out. That's always fun. The AT-AT foot that's buried into the ground here is also pretty amazing. I love that over to the left side he has some greebling basically poking out of the ankle section. I think this is also just a really nice looking AT-AT foot. Like, I don't know if this builder was planning on building a custom AT-AT, but you might want to take a shot at it. Like, this foot alone looks really good, so I would love to see him maybe tackle an actual full-size AT-AT. The final thing I have to talk about on this build is, of course, not necessarily the rock work, but just the groundwork. Like, I love the layering of the round plates and wedge plates, especially towards the front middle section, to just create so much detail and just a nice, like, organic looking ground here. This is not an easy thing to achieve at all. A lot of the times when you want to do something like this, you end up with shapes that like look too uniform. Like, it's a very delicate balance to get something like this that looks very organic and natural, and I think that he has certainly achieved that. I honestly can't pinpoint exactly what he did to do that, but if you wanted to build something like this, I'd say just look at this picture. This is a perfect example of doing a freeform build in like a desert or rocky area. Like, this just works so well. I love the like tan pieces that are kind of splashed around the AT-AT foot. It just makes it look even more organic sitting there. There's even some tan parts like curved slopes and such that are placed on top of the foot, which just gives you the indication that that foot has maybe been there for quite some time. So I just love that. I love pretty much everything about this build. JS Engineered is featured pretty frequently on this MOC series, and I think builds like this really show why he deserves to be a frequent member of the LEGO Star Wars MOC Showcase. And the final MOC we're going to take a look at today is by Martin Latta. It is an insane Hoth MOC, and even insane feels like an understatement for what he has achieved with this Hoth build. This thing is just freaking awesome. First thing I just want to mention is if you've seen Brick Plumber's most recent Hoth MOC, then this will look pretty familiar to you. The thing about this though is this build was actually made before the most recent version of Brick Plumber's Hoth. So the large, long, mountainous section over to the right side of the build, I think I actually talked with Brick Plumber and he was inspired by this build to incorporate that into his build. Obviously, Brick Plumber's is at an even larger scale, which is honestly insane to think about, but Martin really knocked this one out of the park. One of the things I love about this build is the fact that he's incorporated 4 large-scale custom walkers into this build. I don't think they're exactly minifig scale. I think they're maybe like a few inches short of that, but they all still look pretty awesome. Like I couldn't even imagine building this many custom Imperial walkers, like 4 of them. Like it was a lot for me to build the one that I have, but I love what he did here. They all just look so awesome on the battlefield, and there's even some snow speeders flying around. One kind of unfortunate thing is I think he missed an awesome opportunity to show, you know, a snow speeder with its tow cable out wrapping up one of the walkers. It's pretty obvious that he's showing that scene by the downed walker at the front of the pack, but I don't know, I just think it would have been cool to have maybe had one of the standing walkers like in the process of getting wrapped up by one of the snow speeders. But that's kind of a nitpick. That's just, I think, my own personal thing. I like seeing AT-AT walkers getting tied up by snow speeders. I think the snow texturing is pretty interesting. I don't know if this was just a result of him just not having enough tiles to cover the whole thing, or if he just was deliberately going for this kind of effect. I like it because it gives the snow some nice texturing. Like if you look at it from afar, I don't know, just visually looks interesting. There's lots of depth to the snow, which I think looks pretty nice. Over to the right side, he has some pretty incredible rock work. I love it when builders like use a different technique for the snow when they're depicting like snow covered mountains, and you'll see that the dark gray sections, or the standard mountains or rocks, are all depicted by just standard slopes, like very jagged and straight pieces. But for the snow, he's incorporated some curved pieces and just a better variety of smoother looking pieces to basically show that, yeah, the snow's like gonna have a different texture than the rocks. So I always appreciate when builders do small things like that. Like it really just makes for a nice looking snow covered mountain detail. This next photo gives us a better look at the battlefield. One thing I think is awesome that he did on this build is the fact that he actually depicted one of the downed AT-AT walkers. I feel like you just typically don't see that with such large scale walkers like these. The fact that he was able to incorporate that, I think, sets this above most other Hoth MOCs, because you really just don't often see that with large scale walkers. Another really cool thing he incorporated is the walker over to the right side smashing the snow speeder. I love that. That's pretty awesome. Another cool thing about this build is, of course, the snow troopers that are making their way up to the base between the walkers. There's just so much action going on here. If we look over to the left, we see a lot of the rebels in the trenches, which is pretty iconic. Like that's just one of the coolest scenes, at least I think, to recreate in LEGO. There's just something so fun about having a trench on one side of the build with your good guys, with your rebels, and then having these large Imperial walkers over to the right side, kind of like making their way to the base. This next photo shows the biggest section of the interior of the base. You can see he has the original UCS Falcon parked in the base. I believe this MOC was actually made before the newest UCS Falcon even came out. So if you're wondering why this one is being used, well, that's your reason. He has a few rebel troops kind of just walking through the base. There's even a snow speeder lined up, and there's also some LED lights, which is cool. Like, honestly didn't even notice that when I decided to review this MOC, that there were LED lights in this main hangar section, but that's a nice touch. I really do appreciate that. There's also, in the bottom left-hand corner, you'll notice the, I guess, famous Rebel catwalks that sit over the X-Wing fighters. I unfortunately couldn't find a good picture of these little sections that are covering the main ships over there. You can basically just only see it from this picture, but I like that there are at least those like main ships being parked there. I think that was a very cool addition to the build. Next up, we'll start looking at some more of the interior room. So first up, we have Luke and his bacta tank, and the cool thing about this is the Luke is actually submerged in water, I believe, and there's even a light in the bacta tank. So that's just fun. Like, I honestly don't know how he got the water to stay sealed in there. He might have had to like use some like petroleum jelly or something to put between the pieces just to make sure the water didn't get everywhere in the build. But that's awesome. That's such a cool effect. I think if I wanted to build something like this for like a large scale MOC, I might at least give that a try. Like, I don't know how I could get it to work, but it certainly would be a cool thing to achieve if I was able to get it to work. The next photo is just another look at the interior of the base. This is no specific familiar section. It's just an area of the base where we see some rebels kind of gathering, maybe preparing for the battle. There's even a tauntaun here, which is nice. One of the things I love that he's done with this particular section is the use of the like icicles that are hanging in the foreground. Something about that, just like if you're peering into this MOC and you're looking at it and you have to look around the icicles, I feel that as just a viewer of the MOC really helps you put yourself in the build, because like it makes you kind of experience the things that the minifigs would be experiencing. I don't know if I really described that accurately, but hopefully you guys understand that like it just makes the MOC feel more complete and it helps you immerse yourself further in the MOC. So I just appreciate little things like that. It's a nice detail. Next photo, we have the Wampa cave. So Luke is over hanging in the snow on the left side, and his lightsaber is actually pointed up towards him in the snow, which was a nice touch. Over to the right side, we have two Wampas. I didn't even notice that. There are literally two Wampas in this MOC. One of them is chowing on the Rancor, and the other one is over to the right chowing on a popsicle. This next photo shows the main command section, and I love this section so much. The computers that are kind of bookending each side of this build is really fun. And I love this scene because this is, of course, where Han goes and tells General Riken, you know, he has to leave. And then Leia is, of course, very disappointed by this. And that pretty much kicks off the romance aspect of Empire Strikes Back. Honestly, the best romance that we've ever seen in Star Wars. But this is just a very fun section of the build. I love just, you know, all the rebels working on their computers. And then you have, of course, the main characters in the middle. There's just something fun about that. Next photo is honestly kind of hilarious. Chewie is apparently the one who got injured here. Leia is giving him a kiss to make Han Solo angry, I guess. And you can see Han Solo is literally raging out at this. And this final picture just shows off at the top that main command section that I showed you earlier, but also 3 little small hallway vignettes, which I think is fun. I especially love the Vader one. Like, that is such a cool addition to this build. I feel like seeing Vader marching into Echo Base with the snowtroopers behind them is one of the more iconic scenes from the Battle of Hoth. So just having that as a little just small vignette, like you might not notice it if you were looking at the MOC, but as you're walking by, you might catch a glimpse of Vader and say like, oh yeah, I remember that. And I think that's just a really cool way to incorporate that. He's not drawing a ton of attention to it. It's just like, you know, normal things are happening at the base, but oh crap, like Vader's entering. I don't know, that's just super cool in my opinion to have little vignettes like that, things that, you know, it's not like a big open space where you're like, look at this, this is another thing I built here, which is a small little subtle thing that would make a person who's just really trying to pay attention to the details of this build really appreciate what the builder has incorporated here. One other last thing I wanted to mention just from looking at this photo is I love the ice cracks that he has included in the side of this build. It's a pretty small thing, you know, it's not like functional or anything recognizable, but it's just a nice little thing to add detail to what would basically be a cross-section of the ice that Echo Base is built into. I think looking at this build and all the fun things in it just shows why Hoth is such a popular location for LEGO Star Wars MOCs. Like it hits all the beats, you know. It has the large Imperial walkers, which are just really cool things in Star Wars that people really appreciate. You of course have the large rebel base with, you know, ships and all the cool rebels and their rooms and all that fun stuff. You have the trench, so you just have a fun battle scene sitting right outside the base. And of course you can incorporate a Millennium Falcon, the most iconic Star Wars vehicle. There are so many Hoth MOCs out there done at various scales, but I think this easily has to be in my top 5, maybe even my top 2 or 3.